A trip on the Rubicon with my sons had been a dream of mine for a long time, kind of a bucket list item. After connecting with some other Jeepers through a Jeeping forum online, a small group of us agreed to meet on a specific Monday morning in September and brave the trail together. For most of us, it was our first attempt at the Rubicon. For me, two of my boys live with me in California, and our second oldest flew out from Chicago to join us. We had my 2011 Jeep Rubicon lifted with 35-inch tires, and I had hoped that it was trail ready. We also had our 1960 Jeep CJ5 with a rebuilt engine and transmission. It was also lifted, and it also had new trail tires. The day before the Rubicon trip was to start, my boys and I had taken our two Jeeps on a trial trail. The CJ, unfortunately, quickly broke down. We bent a steering drag link, so it was out of commission. So we crowded the rest of our gear, and all four of us, into the Rubicon, and we prepared to set out.
That steering part just wanted to bend. We're trying to jack it up and rebend it. And so Wesley's putting the chain around it to keep it in place while we drop it onto a jack. Calvin is the mechanic's assistant.
By Loon Lake is perhaps the most common trail entrance. There's an informational booth staffed by members of the Friends of the Rubicon group. Air was let out of tires. We met the other members of the group, and we set out with high hopes. We soon came to the start of the Granite Bowl and followed the one Jeep which had been on the trail before. Frankly, I couldn't see much of trail markings, so it was really good to have a leader. And we gathered once again for a group photo.
Straight.
Straight and then to the left. Exactly. Left.
How do I go?
By the early 1860s, Lake Tahoe was already becoming popular with miners and hunters and passing travelers. By the late 1860s, John and George Hunsucker had arrived on the scene and began to improve the land around Rubicon Springs. They ran livestock, and they bottled spring water to distribute to local mining communities. The quality of the water drew many travelers to its source. One of these people was Mrs. S.P. Clark. She bought land around the springs and turned it into a resort, a successful resort. By the late 1880s, it was complete with a two-story hotel, fine furnishings, silverware, high-quality food. Many visitors were attracted. They would travel to the resort through the rough Burton Pass Road, which by that time had gained recognition as a public thoroughfare. While the Rubicon Springs Hotel and outbuildings received quite a lashing from the flash floods of 1908, the resort continued to operate, changing ownership and gaining and losing popularity over time. By the 1920s, the resort was having a tough time making ends meet, and it was finally sold off to the Sierra Power Company in 1930. The hotel building lasted till 1953, when the weight of winter snows collapsed the building. Well, in 1952, a meeting in Georgetown had been held to discuss an organized Jeep tour from Georgetown to Lake Tahoe using the Rubicon Trail. In 1953, in August, 55 Jeeps left Georgetown on a 2-day trip that is now known as the Jeepers Jamboree. It's held the last weekend of July every year, with four-wheelers continuing to follow in the tradition. Today, with the Jamboree and other travelers, some 35,000 vehicles a year brave the boulders and hills and granite obstacles to be able to say, "I survived the Rubicon." The infamous difficulty of the trail caused the Chrysler Corporation in 2003 to introduce a Rubicon version of their Jeep Wrangler to promote the toughness of the vehicles. In the 1970s, the California Association of Four-Wheel Drive Clubs began to work closely with the Forest Service and other local governments on issues surrounding the McKinney-Rubicon Road. The goal was not only to ensure recreational access, but also to help protect the water quality of the Lake Tahoe area. In 2001, the Friends of the Rubicon was formed, an informal coalition of groups and individuals dedicated to keeping the Rubicon Trail open and available to all recreationists. They're the citizen stewards of the Rubicon Trail, and they work with Placer County, El Dorado County, Forest Service, private businesses, and others to ensure that the famed trail stays open as one of the crown jewels of motorized recreation. Those of us who use and enjoy the Rubicon Trail ought to do our part to help support these groups. By the time 2 or 3 miles had been run on the route, Garen's Jeep from Southern California had broken the power steering pump, spraying oil everywhere. 2 rigs decided to join with him to return to Loon Lake and help him out. We really felt bad for our new friend who had to miss this trip. Well, the rest of us slowly made our way eastward on the trail by ourselves for a while. The 2 rigs that went back to accompany Garen were people from Texas. And with us at this point was us from California, a couple from Idaho, and a couple of guys from Nevada. By late afternoon, the Texans had rejoined us once again.
For the camera.
There are entrances to the Rubicon Trail at Wentworth Springs or at the Loon Lake Spillway, or of course it can be traversed starting at the eastern Lake Tahoe end. The Wentworth Springs entrance is the original entrance to the trail. It starts with an obstacle called the Devil's Post Pile. The Loon Lake route is shorter. It first crosses the Granite Bowl, a large open rock valley, and that's the way that we started on our trek. The Wentworth Springs entrance joins the trail from Loon Lake shortly before Ellis Creek. After driving through the section beyond Ellis Creek, the Walker Hill obstacle is encountered, and it includes a steep rocky climb. Then a short distance beyond Walker Hill is the Soup Bowl. Soup Bowl is a short climb with a series of rock ledges that are difficult to negotiate. After passing the Soup Bowl, the Little Sluice awaits. The Little Sluice is also known as the Sluice Box, or some simply call it the Box. It's close to Spider Lake. It's considered the most difficult part of the trail. It can be bypassed in two ways for people that don't care to brave the main trail. After passing the Little Sluice, the next obstacle is $1,000 Hill. Some people call it $1 Million Hill. It's a rock ledge followed by a steep grade facing downhill if you're driving toward Lake Tahoe. The trail splits again about a half mile past that point. The lower trail continues on the granite slabs. This area is also known as the Indian Trail. And you can take the upper trail through the Old Sluice. Both routes lead to Buck Island Lake. The Indian Trail generally is easier and quicker to take. Before passing Buck Island Lake, you come across the difficult Silby Rock. Before hitting the rock, drivers most times of the year cross a stream that can make the rock slick. The trail then continues toward the Big Sluice. This downhill section contains a switchback with rock drop-offs leading to the Rubicon River Bridge and then into the private property of Rubicon Springs. Now, Rubicon Springs is private, as we said, and it's a great overnight camping area. There's a cabin, which is standing where the two-story hotel once stood, housing a caretaker. A number of camping spots is available. They're reasonably priced. When we were there, the charge was only $10 per vehicle. They also have a helipad for emergencies and for large events to fly supplies in. Most large groups set up base camp in the Springs because it's big enough for hundreds of people to camp. Annual events include the Jeepers Jamboree, the Jeep Jamboree, Toyota Land Cruiser Association's Rubathon, and the Marlin Crawler Roundup. From the pictures, you can see that we came at dusk into Rubicon Springs and we stayed the night. The next morning, we took our time rousing out of camp and headed east again. We didn't bother trying to get up and get such an early start, since by the time we camp at Rubicon Springs, 2/3 of the trail is already done and there's not too much left. One of the things that we super enjoyed that morning was the friendly visit from some river otters. Our particular tent was set up down near the river, and the next morning, lo and behold, there was 3, 4, or 5 otters playing right in the water. Never seen anything like that in the mountains before. It was so fun to watch. There's otters out there in the creek. Yeah. I've seen beaver in the mountains, but I've never seen otters. After Rubicon Springs is Cadillac Hill, a series of switchbacks up to Observation Point. It starts with a rutted out section with lots of tree roots exposed. After turning a hairpin or two, the trail becomes very sideways tippy. and has a series of boulders to maneuver around or over. Then there's a steep stair-step obstacle to climb. At the top of the hill, Observation Point itself, a great place to stop and take a break before the long dirt road to Lake Tahoe and look back to see what you've just driven over. Well, we all gathered for the final time at the staging area on the Lake Tahoe end of the trail. We'd seen some great country and felt like we'd accomplished something really special. Several good friends were made. We hope we can Jeep with them again. As for the Rubicon itself, I have to say it went from being a bucket list, once-in-a-lifetime kind of a thing to, well, something I hope we can do nearly every year. A lot of Jeep trips you take are special. Great places to go. But the Rubicon, it's in a class by itself.